Hey guys, welcome back to the 5th annual nomination special for the Andes.
The 5th.
It's our 5th year doing this, yeah.
Yeah, we've done 5 of these now.
Yeah.
Or we're about to do our 5th.
We're about to
one.
do our 5th. We've done 4 so far.
Yes, and we are celebrating the films of 2023. From the top of the barrel to slightly below the top of the barrel.
So like the middle of the barrel.
The middle of the barrel. Yeah, this, if I can do a quick reflection on this, and let me know what you think about this, Connor. For me, this is one of just personal favoritism. This is one of the strongest years in film I feel like I've had the enjoyment of watching basically since like 2019.
Yes, I would say since pre-pandemic times, this has been the strongest year.
Yeah, which is just kind of nice to see. And we're going to talk about the ones we like the most here. But yeah, it was just a great year.
I mean, it got a lot of people back to the theater. I think there was some crazy statistic, like 45% of people that saw Barbie was their first time back in the theater since the pandemic.
That's
Here's like, that
bonkers.
number is just one I pulled. I know there is a crazy high percentage that it was, but I don't recall the exact height of that percentage. So it could be 45, it could be like 22, but like it was something crazy.
That's still insane. That's still an insane number for what that is.
I did a very quick Google. It was nearly a quarter, so almost 25%.
25%. That's not nothing.
It's not nothing. That's pretty decently sized chunk.
Yeah. But yeah, from that we have whittled down the nominees for these 14 categories.
Yes, there's 12 in competition categories and the 2 honorary categories. The Andy Serkis Award, which honors achievement in both vocal and or motion capture performance, and the Thomasin McKenzie Award, named after obviously 3-time Andy Award nominee Thomasin McKenzie.
Yes.
Which
one-time winner.
One-time winner. First year she was nominated, yes.
Yes.
And that honors the greatest overall year in film in any aspect. Last year it was performance, Lana Taylor-Joy. This year it might be something else.
Yeah, you will find out at the Andes. You got to stay tuned for those 2 categories when we announce them, but they will be peppered into the ceremony. And I'm not sure if I want to open this can of worms, Connor, but this morning the Oscars were announced.
Yes, I want to actually.
Is it worth discussing?
I'm glad you bring that up, Dan. I want to say this for the people listening. We are not making our nomination list after watching the Oscars. There was no influence there whatsoever. We made these nominations ahead of time. We were just getting out after.
Yes. Here's the thing. I wanted us partly to beat the Oscars because we made our list on Sunday.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, we can do it. But we were both a little exhausted after, the day that I have deemed second Christmas in my home, where I get to jump on a call and have Connor yell at me for 3 hours because I'm a crazy man and I deserve it. But yeah, this all stuff is a list that we crafted before the Oscar nominations came out, but you're probably hearing this, if I'm on track, either the Friday night or Sunday night after the Oscar nominations were announced. So yes, those have no bearing on the Andes, the award show that matters.
Yes, Robert De Niro was up at 5 a.m. listening to the Oscar noms. But he looks over at his assistant and he says, okay, but check YouTube. Check YouTube. Are the Andes up yet?
No, sorry, Robert. You're going to have to wait.
Sorry, Mr. De Niro.
It's on its way. But yeah, let's kick things off, I guess, as always, with all film and created category. Best production.
And to remind people, this is a category we created that encompasses production design, hair and makeup, and costume design.
Yeah.
The nominees are Asteroid City, Barbie, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Poor Things, and Oppenheimer. Insert clapping here.
Insert clapping. Yeah, I'd say we nailed it. No, I know it's a strong list. I think each of these. There's not much to say on this one because all these are pretty obvious. If you look at the production of all 5 of these films, it's so stylized. It's so in your face. It is so, look at the period accurate Oppenheimer, all the off the wall bonkers pull things, Asteroid City, kind of that Technicolor 50s vibe, and then Guardians Volume 3, which, you talk about Guardians Volume 3. You know it better than me.
Guardians Volume 3, one of my favorite films of the year. is one, there is the Guinness Book of World Records of it all, where they have the most prosthetics in any film ever, and very technically well done prosthetics with the humanimals, and obviously with Dave Bautista's Drax, and Karen Gillan's Nebula, and Pom Clementif's Mantis, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But also, the production, we're going to every aspect of it. The practical sets for this movie are insane. And the orgoscope is all practical. They built an entire, 2 to 3 story nowhere. The entire opening movie is a real physical set.
Legitimately, I think it's really easy for a lot of people to look at Guardians Volume 3 and kind of forget the fact that there is a lot of practical ingenuity that's occurring right next to VFX work or other just MCU big budget house style nonsense that some people have gotten tired of. So honestly, overall, I mean, if you're going to talk about one superhero movie this year that was still, I mean, creating a world in a physical sense and adding characters to that world that are unlike any we've seen before, and the characters that we know so well, Mantis, Drax, Nebula, still that awarding that work for makeup and for costumes and everything. Yeah, it's absolutely worth a nomination here. So I'm happy it's on the list. But yeah, anyways, congrats to the nominees. As always, tune in to see if your film wins. Yeah, okay. Next up, we have Best Editing. And the nominees for this year's Andes for Best Editing all Jennifer Lame for Oppenheimer, Pietro Scalia for Ferrari, Kirk Baxter for The Killer, Takeshi Seiyama, Rie Matsubara, and Akane Shiraishi for The Boy and the Heron, and Matthew Hannum for The Iron Claw.
Okay, so Dan, obviously this was a category that I think we were pretty much in agreement on when we were doing the narrowing down, right?
Pretty much, in the sense that it was a rather bloodbathless discussion.
Compared to some categories, it was relatively bloodless. That's correct.
No, no, it was this kind of thing of I think there was a lot of strong editing this year. So with your list combined with my list, it just ended up being a pretty solid list of editors. And it's interesting to see who actually made this list, because one name in general, Jennifer Lame, whose career I've been following for a little bit now. I've loved a lot of her work as an editor. Obviously, she works with Nolan. That's a big credit of hers. I believe she's worked with Noah Baumbach, another big credit of hers. Very cool that she got the nomination here, because she did kill it for Oppenheimer.
Well, the thing with Jennifer Lame is, while you were talking, Dan, I was thinking, we kind of messed up by snubbing her for Tenet. And then I realized, we weren't doing this category that year.
No, it just didn't exist. Yeah.
No, because if we'd been doing editing since the beginning, this is only the second year out of the 5, I think she might be a 3-time nominee already. I think she might have Marriage Story, Tenet, and then Oppenheimer.
Honestly, yeah, she would have been a 3-timer.
So I apologize to Jennifer Lame for not having
one of all
being
greatest working editors. Yes.
Yeah. But no, this year, a big thing, we talked about that for Oppenheimer, for The Killer, for Ferrari. Their movies built on momentum.
Yes, absolutely. And that really rests in the hands of the editors to make that click for the audience. And they did a great job.
Yeah. And then obviously you have the slower, but by not a negative word, slower.
Yeah.
But you have
still dynamic.
Yes, you have the more methodical, I guess, Boy and the Heron and Iron Claw.
Iron Claw, which mostly catches my attention when it comes to scene transitions. How they weave every sequence in the film together to be so cohesive, despite the ridiculous amount of time jumps. You never feel lost. You never feel like you're in some different thing or some jarring thing. They do this great job of taking these moments from years and years apart of this family story and making it feel like one narrative, like you're catching it all and it just feels smooth.
But they're very subtle transitions that if you're not paying attention, you can miss, but they're very heavily emotional moments that are just so graciously put in the edit. So there is a moment that I'm not going to spoil for you that is essential to the edit. And it's a beautiful moment that cuts perfectly where it hits you like a ton of bricks. There's another shot involving a character that is behind somebody.
Oh,
that is God. The way that shot is orchestrated.
that first moment you mentioned is the beginning of my emotional downfall.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Oh, God.
And obviously that is due to the acting and directing as well. But
Oh,
without
yeah.
but without a
Takes an
good
all-in.
editor, everything can be flat. I
Yeah,
have
the
seen some
boat
movies
sinks.
that I know are good. I've seen no offense to people who directed these movies, but I have seen Dan save a couple movies in the edit, including one of mine. So I understand
Well,
the
thanks,
power
buddy.
of an editor.
Thanks, buddy. And I will always be there for you. All right, moving on. We have Best VFX. Connor, I will let you list these off.
The nominees for visual effects are The Creator, Guardians of the Galaxy, Volume 3, The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, Oppenheimer, and Beau is Afraid.
Obviously, you can look at the work Oppenheimer did. I think a lot of people saw that one.
Yeah, a lot of people did
Atomic
see that movie. You are
Things.
correct.
A lot of people saw that movie. It's they're re-releasing it in theaters actually this coming weekend because they knew it was going to get so many.
Yes, they knew it was going to get
nominations.
13 Academy Award nominations.
Yeah, literally. Is that tied for the most?
No, one short.
Oh man, it missed Best Original Song. But one that Connor turned me on to that he wanted me to watch was The Creator, the new Gareth Edwards film. No.
Yes,
What's
Gareth Edwards, yeah.
Gareth Edwards, John David Washington. Yes.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Which I mean, Dan, I put it on the short list. We don't, for context, you will listening to this, we don't mention what categories we're campaigning for when we tell them to watch the movie because we want them to be a purely like open experience. And, you know, Dan, if you love John David Washington, then you did. And that'd be a nice surprise for me. But I will tell you, Dan, I put it on the short list for VFX. That was the one reason I put it on the short list.
Yeah.
I love
It kinda
that
had to
movie
be the one.
a lot. But
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
It's go back to Rogue One. It looks just as good.
Yeah.
It's something where Gareth Edwards has kind of found his visual niche. And when he's given the money, he's given the cast, he's given the right story, it's going to work visually.
Dan,
I'm
do you know what's special about The Creator? Do you know this? This whole thing was shot on a Sony FX3, a prosumer camera.
Oh, whoa.
If you watch the behind the scenes, it's Gareth Edwards like on the camera, which is the size of like a DSLR camera, on a gimbal he is holding, with him running with the actors and someone holding a light on a boom pole.
That is insane.
The scene on the beach, Dan, they didn't close the beach. If you look in the background, you can see an open bar with people watching them film the movie.
That is, man, sometimes you're doing it on a shoestring. That just shows the effectiveness of, man, that, an $80 million shoestring. But yes.
But the thing is also, Dan, what's unheard of with Creator is they didn't do VFX until they locked picture.
Oh.
Which is, because they had to save money. So if there was a scene that might not make it in the final edit, they couldn't afford to do VFX work on it. So they locked picture and then did the VFX work from there. Because every shot they worked on had to make it into the final movie.
Every shot mattered.
Exactly.
They must, it's so tight. How long did that movie end up being? It's not that long. It's just over 2, right?
It's like 2:13, I think.
Is 2? Okay, yeah. So I can't even imagine that process of like having to cut shots, being like, can we afford to make this work in the movie? Do we have the time? Like,
yes, and like every second, every frame counts in both ways. Yeah.
Bravo to the creator.
Yes. Great movie, great VFX story. We could go down the list here. The one thing that is not to talk about the Oscars, Dan, but Oppenheimer was not eligible for VFX at the Oscars this year. It did not make the short list.
Okay.
It's eligible for our awards because I consider what Nolan does without any kind of computer-generated imagery to still be visual effects.
Yeah, he's still it's a fine line between like doing practical effects or like literally in-camera effect trickery.
Yeah, I consider forced perspective to be a visual effect.
Yes.
Not they did forced perspective, but get my point.
Guardians, obviously, I mean, we've discussed that.
You'll believe a raccoon can talk,
Yeah, I mean, it's a thing of like, if it's practical production aspects all right there with the visual production aspects of the VFX. And then Hunger Games. just looks great.
Yes, it does. There's a lot of really good
Yes.
songbirds and snakes in that movie.
There's cool snakes. They got that big old tank. They're
Big
all
old
slithered
tank of
around.
those snakes.
Big old tank of snakes. Viola Davis.
And the snakes
loves
are on
them all.
Rachel Zegler. Can you believe it? She was singing to those
Anyways.
snakes.
Moving on, best cinematography. Always a difficult one to narrow down. I think there was always a lot of talent in the pool of cinematographers working in Hollywood, working in international cinema that we get to choose from. But this was a particularly hard year. But I think we have an amazing 5. So the nominees for best cinematography all: Shabir Kirshner for Past Lives, Hoyt van Hoytma for Oppenheimer, Robbie Ryan for Poor Things, Linus Sandgren for Saltburn, and Atsushi Okui for The Boy and the Heron. And you might have recognized a couple of those names. 2 in particular, Linus Sandgren and Hoyt van Hoytma, who I believe have been nominated before, correct?
Yes, both last year.
Yeah, they're both back-to-back nominees. Bravo to these 2 gentlemen. And how many of these all shot on film?
I know for sure the one shot on film, obviously, Christopher Nolan always shoots on film.
Oppenheimer.
IMAX film with Oppenheimer.
Poor Things
Actually
is film.
making black and white IMAX film for this movie. Yeah, inventing a whole new film stock for...
Well, having Kodak invented.
yes, having someone else invent it. Nolan did not invent it himself. He hired out the process of inventing a new film format.
Yes.
Then Linus Sandgren shot Saltburn on film, and it's incredibly gorgeous.
It is.
Poor Things is shot on film,
It sure is.
and I think so is Past Lives.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if Miyazaki...
I think those are digitally scanned frames.
Those are digitally scanned. They've got to be.
But still,
I mean, it's obviously it's the hand-drawn, hand-painted. It's
yes,
like...
so they are. It's still a very tactile medium. But yeah, I think those are
Yes.
digitally scanned frames. But I mean, but here's the thing. But if it's a digitally scanned frame of a hand drawing, that is kind of a weird gray area for like...
It is, because it is the physical manifestation. It's like restoring a film to digital. It's like doing like a restoration almost, but you're doing, where yes, you're seeing it digitally, but originally, not like The Boy and the Heron was a flip book before they turned it into a movie, but it was a physical piece,
Yes, and regardless
Animation's
of what
interesting
format, looks incredible.
Yes, so bravo to these 5 talented individuals. One that really came in right under the wire for me was Shabir Kirshner for Past Lives, which a film that really lives and breathes a very tranquil atmosphere. And that's got to be one of its most positive attributes, is that the visual language supports that so well.
I completely agree. It's a gorgeously shot movie. And I'm the one who kind of pushed you to watch Past Lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, you did.
Gorgeous movie.
Yeah. We will probably talk a bit more about all these cinematographers at the Andes themselves. So let us move on to Best Stunts.
The nominees for stunt work are The Iron Claw, John Wick Chapter 4, Magic Mike's Last Dance, No Hard Feelings, and The Killer. So, Dan, there's a couple here that maybe surprise people.
Yeah, John Wick Chapter 4 is probably the real dog horse in this.
And then we're kind of pushing the limits of what is a stunt.
Yeah.
But no, when you see something like Magic Mike's Last Dance or No Hard Feelings.
Particularly No Hard Feelings.
Well, I would say Magic Mike's Last Dance. I think people don't consider dancing to be stunts like we do, but I consider what those guys and gals do to be stunts, quite frankly.
Here's the thing. Sometimes in a movie, dancing is not a stunt, and sometimes it really is.
Yes.
It takes choreography, it takes practice, and it takes a lot of people doing a lot of things in synchronicity that is deeply impressive. What I love so much about this category this year is that it represents so many types of stunts, where before it's not just people jumping out of exploding cars or punching each other or kicking. We have so many different styles when it comes to the physical comedy stylings of No Hard Feelings, the dance choreography of Magic Mike's Last Dance, the wrestling choreography and stunts of the Iron Claw, and then we have the killer in John Wick Chapter 4, which is like, if there was an award for most stunts, you might give it to John Wick.
Yes. If the award was most stunts, or it earned some brownie points every time Keanu Reeves fell down a step, then yeah, I think it may be
in that third act
Yes.
sequence.
I think he falls down 4 flights of stone steps in that movie.
Yep. And then he gets back up, and then he goes all the way back down, and he fights his way back up, and it's insane because it's like with everything, it's like, John Wick, you only have 7 minutes to get to the top of these stairs.
Yeah.
John Wick, you only have 6 minutes and 20 seconds to get to the top of these stairs.
Well, the thing about, I mean, we've talked about, this is a slight tangent on the John Wick movies. If you think about it, the majority of the stuff is happening over the course of like the 2 and 3 are like the same. No, 1 and 2 are like the same day.
Yeah. I mean, Parabellum is like hours.
Yes, that's
Parabellum
true.
is like, he goes excommunicado and they try and catch him over the course of like 8 freaking hours. I don't even know. Like, it's ridiculous.
But Chapter 4, the majority of the movie, I think, is only like 10 hours.
Mm-hmm. And it's impressive. It's
very
impressive how
impressive.
that comes together. Yeah. But yeah, not that that's going to dominate the conversation.
It's not necessarily
here,
that it's going to win. It's just like, if you're going to talk about John Wick Chapter 4, you're going to talk about the insane stunt work in that movie to the point, like, you know, there's some times every year where there's one movie, it's like, well, this is definitely getting a nomination. And when I saw John Wick Chapter 4, I was like, well, that's definitely going to get a stunt nomination.
Yes, that's like, it's kind of a given.
Yes.
All right. Well, next up is Best Score. The nominees are Richard Reed Parry for Eileen, Daniel Rawson and Christopher Bear for Past Lives, Devontae Hines for Master Gardener, Ludwig Göransson for Oppenheimer, and Yujiro Noda and Kazuma Janucci for Suzume. And particularly for that last one we listed, Suzume, Yujiro Noda is the main brain behind Radwimps, the band, who collaborated with Kazuma Janucci to make the score. So they're kind of doing a collaborative thing. But yeah, a strong 5, a surprising 5, that I was not expecting these films to make the best score. Not that I was expecting what would make the best score, but a lot of unique voices coming out this year, I feel like.
Yeah, and a lot of like very unique, distinctive scores too. Like the score to Suzume there's pieces in there that are nothing like I've ever heard in a film score before.
Oh yeah, and I think you can chalk that up to the collaboration with Radwimps to adding a different element. And then you have, I guess, the very expansive and sometimes synthetic Master Gardener score, which was an immediate highlight for me once I heard it. And then I went back and I listened through it on Spotify. Yeah, and then obviously we have the big one, the one that this gentleman has been nominated before, and it's no surprise, Ludwig Göransson, music producer, film composer, friend of Donald Glover. He's got all of his calls, you know?
Yes, Andy and Oscar Award winner Ludwig Göransson, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, he won for Tenet, man. I mean, for me, the big names is probably Daniel Rawson and Christopher Bear, which coincidentally is half of one of my absolute favorite bands, Grizzly Bear, which makes sense because they are a New York City-based folk rock, indie rock group from the 2000s and 2010s. They kept going. And it's really amazing to see not only these two guys collaborate up on a score again, but creating something that feels similarly like the sounds that Grizzly Bear is making, but putting it in a film context that, again, with Past Lives, we're talking a very tranquil film. It works great when there is tension, when there is joy, when there is melancholy. The score, I think, inhabits those feelings really well, you know?
Yeah, entirely. Funny enough, Past Lives, I mentioned to you during the nomination process, was a very late addition to my shortlist.
Same, yeah.
Because I literally, as I was making my ballot here to, I make my half before we can collaborate on both of ours, I was making that, And then I realized, oh, I don't have the past lives score here. So I listened to it as I was making my nominations. And I was like, oh, I should definitely have it in there.
It should probably go in. Yeah. No, it was definitely like the last minute addition for me. I mean, Past Lives being the final film before our self-imposed cutoff that I watched for the Andes. Richard Reed Parry for Eileen. Another one that adds to the weird impending desolation and dread of that film, that just colors the atmosphere so well in what would otherwise be a pretty... I think a lot of that film rests on the score at times to really keep the momentum going, and that's very important for a film like Eileen when it's trying to pull off what it is pulling off, you know? All right, so now we are in our second half of the nominees episode. We are talking about actors, we are talking about directors, and eventually the big one.
Talking about pictures.
Yeah, so let's start it off. Connor, can you read the nominees for Best Supporting Actor?
Charles Melton, May December. David Harbour, Gran Turismo. Harris Dickinson, The Iron Claw. Mark Ruffalo, Poor Things. And Benny Safdie, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
Now, if there's one performance I want to highlight, it is a performance from an actor who kind of exists in a very special place. Not in my heart, but in general, the idea of an actor who can be in any movie and they make that movie better. By their presence, by their performance, you're like, oh, thank goodness, we're back to this guy. Maybe you're not liking the A plot or the B plot, or there's something you're not into, or the lead is unlikable. You have this person who comes in and makes your film-going experience that much better. It happened in Violent Night, and it happened in Gran Turismo. This is David Harbour we're talking about.
Yeah, Dan, you didn't
One
even
of my
say who was.
favorite working actors. Yeah, you knew what I was talking about. Yeah.
No, David Harbour is such an incredible presence and is now a leading man. But for years was just that guy that showed up in movies. And to the point, Dan, 2016, I think the year before Stranger Things started.
Stranger Things was October 16th.
Okay, so...
Because it went 16, 18, and then I think summer of 2020.
Dan, Suicide Squad was in August.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like weeks apart.
Weeks apart. And that's... I mean, I knew him from Black Mass, too, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But when this guy showed up, I was like, oh, this guy is great. This one scene performance of this guy who's just like an FBI agent or something.
Yeah. But he had his year, man. He had his year. And Stranger Things, obviously, for him as Chief Hopper, has done wonders for his career.
It's made him a household name.
Yes. And thank goodness, because we've gotten so many great performances from him that I don't think would have been previously accessible. No. And this year's addition to his filmography is Gran Turismo, where he plays the grizzled ex-racer who's been who's been stuck with like his careers in the dumps. And he has to come in and train these gamers to race real cars.
They don't know anything about real cars.
They don't know what it's like.
Their cars are made of ones and zeros.
They've been living in the Matrix.
The only rubber they burnt is their plow steering wheels.
Exactly.
But yeah, he takes a very, maybe you could say, tired character trope.
Oh, absolutely. character. Like, we've seen this character 24 times before, but what he brings to it is
Harbour
pathos.
Yes, he's a big, like, strong, tough man. And a lot of parts he's played like big, strong man, big tough, strong man like Hopper.
Yeah,
but he has such inherent sensibility and sensitivity that he brings to everything, even something like Hellboy, that really like just accelerate that material. And it's incredible.
When the lead in Gran Turismo crashes, and he almost goes, because that's not a spoiler.
It's in the trailer.
That's like midway through the film. That's in the trailer too. Yeah, when he crashes, and there's a moment when David Harbour is half, like, just ecstatic that he's alive, and half furious with him. His delivery, his voice cracks in these certain moments, and he just kind of falls apart because all of this is happening to him again. And not only this, he's looking at this kid who's he was his age and he remembers it, except he knows the kids who didn't make it out. And what he brings to scenes like that is like, you're making me care about Gran Turismo. Like he brings the film, he elevates the film to a place where emotionally I'm resonating with these characters, and that's magical.
Yeah, Dan, that movie is product placement in its own right. It's a video game adaptation. One, with the video game exists in that world, but two, there is a moment with David Harbour and a digital Walkman that made me almost cry.
Yeah.
So if he can turn product placement in a video game movie where the video game exists and almost make me cry, then it's a pretty solid performance.
It is. So David Hallberg, very glad you made the cut here, my man.
Yes.
You were fantastic.
And then Dan, I want to shout out somebody who did not get an Oscar nomination today. Charles Melton.
For May December, a very strong performance from a very, well, I mean, for lack of a better term, Oscar-y film. You have Todd Haynes, Julianne Moore,
Natalie Portman.
You got big names who have been represented at the Academy before. You have a very, you just have a very adventurous and exciting script behind it.
Yes, a very controversial
romance. Yes,
engaging. And it's a debate if it's a comedy or not, but it's a sometimes funny script.
Yes.
But Charles Melton, who people most likely know from, a couple teen, drama romances and the show Riverdale.
Oh, he's in Riverdale?
He is Reggie in Riverdale. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, you're the one person who doesn't know that.
Here's the thing. This is why I get lost, is because I see random actor is in a movie and everyone's going crazy over it. It's like, oh man, did you hear that new movie with Sydney Sweeney? And I'm like, who is that? And it's like, Euphoria. That's what I learned. It's a person from Euphoria, a very big show. So it's these things that just kind of hit me in these passing shades where I'm like, oh, there's a famous person with all generation. Charles Melton. I didn't know him before this, but he gave a mature and impactful performance that clicks together with the last shot he is on film.
Yeah.
The last shot that we get to see him, it wraps everything together. And if you, an actor, can bring your performance together in a final shot and end people with that, it's memorable.
Yes. The movie,
that's why he's here.
You could argue the subject material is not subtle. The movie itself is not very subtle in what it does. I like all the performances. So when you get to Charles Melton's performance, which I won't give anything away, but if you know what the movie's about, you know his character and kind of where his growth and development, for lack of a better term, kind of stopped.
Yes.
And you see how the event that happened years ago for this character has shaped him. And it's so beyond subtle, the little things that he does. And I'm going to do it for Dan. There's a hand motion he does that made me sob. It is something that is so immediately grounded in this way of innocence. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, I would even argue, haunting performance from somebody who I think has been discredited a lot in the past years because of the material he's in.
I'm not broken up about Charles Melton not getting the Oscar at the end of the day, because he got an Andy nomination this year, and that says something. If you can walk down Hollywood Boulevard and you have the chance for that PDF, I mean, I don't know, man.
Yeah. I'm sure it was a bummer for him this morning, but when he refreshes YouTube in a few days, he'll be okay.
Harris Dickinson in The Iron Claw.
Yeah, he plays David Van Erich, the second brother to start wrestling, because Carrie starts later after the Olympics get canceled by Carter.
Yes. It's him and Zac Efron that kind of started off. Then their younger brother comes along later, but it's the two of them, and then they bring in Jeremy Allen White.
Yeah.
But it's like for the majority of the film, you have these main three wrestlers, and how he fits into, some would say, the heavyweights of Jeremy Allen White and Zac Efron is so fascinating.
Yes, and
what he brings to his Von Erich character, who he is, because he is really unique.
And obviously, we want to reward when an actor does something we've never seen from them before. And Harris Dickinson's a relative newcomer. I've not seen a lot of stuff he's done. I didn't get a chance to watch Scrapper this year, which I've heard he's incredible in.
Yeah.
But this is vastly different than his performance from last year with Triangle of Sadness. You could not be further removed from his character in that to David Von Erich.
Yeah.
So to reward
Yes.
that dissonance is something we look out for, and we do want to award, because and we don't know if we will award it, but at the very least, he did get a nomination, and well deserved.
It was great. Sneezes for Harris.
Sneezes for Harris.
And then Mark Ruffalo, the one we share with the Oscars now.
Yeah, the only one we share at the Oscars.
Things.
Yeah,
Him being able to bounce back in a creative sense with Poor Things, was miraculous to watch. He's chewing the scenery,
yes.
as we say. Bella, I love him.
Yes,
he just, he really.
Yeah, the thing with Mark Ruffalo is he's an incredibly versatile actor. Before the MCU and during and around, he's shown that he is an exceptional talent. But even with Poor Things, which is a performance that honestly kind of grew on me. I watched the movie and I loved him in it, but I was like, I don't know if he's going to get a nom. I don't know if he's in my 5. And the more it stuck with me, and the more I realized what he was doing, how I've not seen this, even from someone who is so versatile and so, transformative in his roles, to never have seen something like this. Where the point is, like, I forgot it was Mark Ruffalo. If that makes, I know it's the dumb thing everyone says. Well, he's unrecognizable in this role, which is not true.
No, but like, here's the thing: he sells the character.
Yes.
You're sitting there, and at first you're like, really, Mark Ruffalo with like a British accent? Okay, movie, but like, you get 30 minutes in, and you're like, no, I get it.
And after the fact, you're like,
him.
oh yeah, that was Mark Ruffalo, wasn't it? That's
this one
crazy.
is a new shade of Ruffalo, and I love it. And finally, Benny Safdie.
Yes.
My feel-good performance of the year. My feel-good 70s dad performance of the year with All You There, God, It's Me, Margaret. And it was a very difficult decision between his performance there and his performance in Oppenheimer, because he's very good in that too.
Yes, especially when we think about Benny Safdie, we think about the Safdie brothers in general.
We think this grimy New York, nihilistic.
Yeah, you think about this
style,
very jagged, grimy, disgusting edge. Like, you're going to get tetanus from like the edge around the Safdie brothers. And I mean the best way possible. And then you have the dad from Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret. And it's, how is that the same guy? How is someone who has this beyond jagged, grimy edge to him also the sweetest, most approachable, kindest, warmest presence I've seen on screen this year?
Yeah, let's move on to Best Supporting Actress. The nominees all: Da'Vine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers, Allison Oliver for Saltburn, Viola Davis for Air, Kate McKinnon for Barbie, and Rachel McAdams for Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
Which, speaking of someone who's a relative newcomer, I forget who we said about that. Was it with Harris Dickinson? He said a relative newcomer.
Relative newcomer, yes.
Yeah, but get out the relative newcomer stuff aside. Someone who has came onto the scene and has consistently blown me away with their performances ever since 2019, that recent, with Dolomite Is My Name, Da'Vine Joy Randolph.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Who, even with that movie, if you recall, Dan, she didn't end up getting a nomination, but she was like on everyone's mind during award season. I always say, and I think I say it too much, the expression of, I leave the movie or I leave the theater thinking about blank. And in The Holdovers, an incredible movie with a lot of incredible elements to it and incredible performances in it, I leave the movie thinking about Da'Vine Joy Randolph. And every time I see Da'Vine Joy Randolph on screen, I leave the thing thinking about her.
Yeah. She
utter talent.
Here's the thing. She's one of those actors who has that presence.
Yes.
That weight.
Well, she started on the stage, so it makes sense that she has that presence. She was a well-acclaimed stage actor before she began work on movies.
And I will say she is in another one of your favorite movies. A movie's about a little cat who has a wish that may be the last wish.
Yes. She has a very small vocal part in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish.
And she's good in Rustin.
She is good in Rustin. She has like one scene in that movie, but she's very good in it.
But she's good in it. Da'Vine particularly has such a grip on who her character is, not only being a grieving mother, but also a grieving mother in the 70s, bringing the historical context into it and weaving that all together is just makes me appreciate that film more and more. And then we have Alison Oliver from Saltburn, who is the sister of the
Yeah,
family.
she plays Venetia, yes. It is very much a Connor nomination. I did fight for Alison Oliver. And if you've seen Saltburn, which you probably have because there's a big TikTok meme now, which is kind of a bummer. But anyway, if you've seen Saltburn, movie I do actually really enjoy. There's 3 scenes in particular where Alison Oliver elevates the material, which is already pretty good material. There is a scene, utterly devastating scene, and you just see somebody who has experienced such immense loss and is just grasping and trying to regain some kind of control, because Venetia is somebody who has always had some kind of control, who has always been, manipulative and like had this power of like her wealth and extravagance has always provided her.
Yeah, it's a thing of like Saltburn is similarly to Promising Young Woman. It is kind of another dialogue on the constructs of power. The idea of power changing hands and how that can occur, and how sometimes it feels like in worlds like this, it takes something very, very otherworldly to change who holds the power.
Yes. And then Kate McKinnon, our first acting nomination from the film Barbie.
Yes, weird Barbie. She had me laughing at every joke. It was hilarious, and the comedic relief was. This is, in my opinion, her best performance. I've never seen her land so well with me.
There may be specific SNL sketches that I think she works better.
Yes,
but in terms of feature performance, yes, I do agree with you. This is her best performance. Incredible presence that adds so much to the overall vibe and feeling and heart of that movie to such a unique way too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But she excels in the material so much, and she adds, a depth to it that I think if given to a lesser comedian could have really fallen flat.
And then we have Viola Davis for Air, which also, considering the year Viola Davis had, also with Hunger Games, couple of strong performances. We went with Air here because it's obviously I would not consider it a spoiler to say is that you never really interact with Michael Jordan in Air.
No.
That's not a spoiler.
Fact. Yeah, it's a well-known fact.
But who we do interact with is his parents, and how we are able to get such a strong portrait of him through her. Granted, yes, his father is there too, but mainly through her. She kind of runs the household. Is really fascinating because it's almost like Viola Davis is pulling double duty here, Yeah.
And even though we don't see him in the actual movie, Michael Jordan was heavily involved with them every step of the way, with one, approving the movie being made on an emotional level, but also just, providing a lot of context to them as they were working on the film. And he said to Ben Affleck, one of his earliest conditions for the movie getting made is he was like, I want Viola Davis to play my mother.
Yeah. Yeah. And she embodies that so well. She has that strength. And then finally, Rachel McAdams, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. A very similar reasoning, honestly, for Viola Davis, and her nomination as for Rachel's is a very down-to-earth performance. Something as simple as a 70s mother navigating how to be an adult woman as her daughter is trying to figure out what it means to be an adult woman as she is going through puberty, and having the two of them together interact, and having her own story, really, with the whole parent-teacher association and all this.
Well, parent-teacher association,
stuff.
and also, how do you be a parent when you are so distant from your own parents?
Yeah.
What does that deal with your relationship to being a mother when you and your own mother are so far apart?
Yeah. It's Rachel McAdams has always been one of my favorite actresses for dramatic roles and for comedic roles. Look no farther than Game Night. I don't know. Considering family, taking a performance that considers the family dynamic in a very heartwarming way, but also in a very head-on way, which I appreciated. So yeah, good nominees.
The nominees for Best Actor are Adam Driver, Ferrari, Coleman Domingo, Rustin, Cillian Murphy, Oppenheimer, Paul Giamatti, The Holdovers, and my favorite actor of all time, Ryan Gosling, Barbie.
I gotta ask, is this Ryan's first nomination in the Andes?
It is Ryan's first Andy nomination.
First Andy nom, yes.
Yes, it is his third Academy Award nomination.
Oh, he's nominated. I didn't even know that.
You didn't know he was nominated?
No,
this year,
I didn't. I think I just skipped over the lead actor category when I was doing the browse through.
Well, he's in supporting
the
there.
Oscars. Okay.
This is our yearly category fraud is Ryan Gosling for Barbie. But
Okay, yeah.
I think he's a lead, which we can go in a little bit. But yeah, Ryan Gosling, my favorite actor.
Yeah, your favorite actor. He's finally getting represented here. That's pretty cool. The one thing that kind of gets me about it is like this is and will be through just the public consciousness, through Hollywood. This is a career defining moment for Ryan Gosling.
Yes.
Like when you're looking at the list of performances he's done, he's always obviously been a notable star, but this I can't think of a larger impact a character of his has had, you know?
Well, Dan, arguably, for the common man,
Yeah.
this is his biggest thing since The Notebook.
Yes, I would say so. I think this kind of bookends a sort of the eras. I don't know.
Yeah.
When I look at Gosling's career, you've done Gosling Quest,
I
so
have.
you've
I'm up to
seen
date.
all of them. You know all of them. I tend to think of his career kind of in two parts, and I feel like Barbie is the end of the second part because I think this feels like a turn for him a little bit, or like he's going out with a bang on this chapter of whatever he's been doing.
Yes.
But you feel that?
Well, Dan, I more than feel that I very much agree with you.
Yeah.
I would say we're now going into the third chapter of his career.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
You have the young, attractive heartthrob era that I think ends in 2011 with a little bit of a spark with Crazy Stupid Love coming back in 2013. But you have the Artur era, I will say, where he's working with people like Nicholas Winding Refn.
Yep.
He works with Villeneuve.
He
works with
directs his own
Chazelle.
film, doesn't he?
Directs his own film
Yeah.
that's heavily influenced by Winding Refn.
Yes.
And now, after his independent period, having 2 daughters, where he took his time off to spend time with his daughters.
Good. Family man. Good for him.
Yeah. But now, ending his more auteur-driven era, which not saying Greta's not an auteur, and I don't want that bullshit. I'm not saying that. But now he's cycling back into a new era, kind of the cousin of the, romantic lead era, where he's becoming the funny, charismatic, handsome man era.
Yes.
He's going into his Netflix action movie. He's going into his comedy with Barbie. And coming out this year, 2024, is an action comedy where he plays a handsome stuntman.
The Fall Guy.
In The Fall Guy.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. In a weird distillation, I would say the middle part of his career was built on him being cool.
Yeah.
Stuff like Drive, Blade Runner, to extension La La Land, different kind of cool than those two, but still cool. Only
Cool.
God Forgives, still cool. In this
Yes.
new current era, I think the new adjective is handsome.
He's a dad.
He's a dad.
He is a dad, and he's a fun dad, and he's a funny dad who's still ripped.
Yes, Dan, it is beyond off tangent. It is insane how jacked Ryan Gosling is.
Right.
To the point where he does a pull up in Barbie. Me and Erica in the theater, surrounded by people, went, "Whoa."
Yeah.
And there's a shot in the Fall Guy trailer where he has the electrode things on his back and he does this.
Yeah, and he turns around, and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, that's not a double."
Have you seen The Gray Man?
No.
There's one shot in The Gray Man with his shirt off, and it's insane, Dan,
Whoa.
how built he is.
He must have a good trainer.
Yes, he does. I'm sure he does.
Paul Giamatti, The Holdovers.
Yes, no, you have the very much eccentric, surreal Barbie humor, where Gosling is swinging for the fences and going beyond.
Yes.
I would argue, and you have this. You're not gonna have Mr. Hunnam in a musical sequence.
No. No.
Very different kinds of comedic performance, but Giamatti also is incredibly funny while being also incredibly grounded and very real.
Yeah,
We
no,
all know
yeah.
somebody like Mr. Hunnam, and
I had those
can
teachers. I
yeah.
absolutely had those teachers.
I mean, and not to go too deep into the weeds of comparing him to Ken, but they're both men who feel incredibly lost and stuck where they are in their lives.
Yeah, Paul Giamatti, great. I guess we can cover the most obvious one, Cillian Murphy,
Yes. Yeah.
Oppenheimer. Insane performance from what I've read of his commitment to the role and his kind of like the mental fortitude to go into this film and cover this man, to kind of live in his shoes for as long as he did, and portray him in the way that he did is spellbinding. um, yeah, what'd you think about Cillian? I feel like we haven't really talked Oppenheimer that much this year. Like, we
Yeah.
watched it, we liked it, but we didn't really like deep dive. Not that we have to do it now, but like for Cillian, what grabbed you about his performance?
Well, the thing about Cillian Murphy is he's kind of like, at least to me, spiritually cousins of David Harbour.
Yes.
For a long time, it was like you didn't really know his name. It's like, oh, I like when that guy's in movies. That guy is always incredible. I like seeing him. And he's had more leads than Harbour has. I think he's been working longer overall, but
Yeah, I mean it's that same thing of like, well, he had Peaky Blinders, just in the same way David Harbour had Stranger Things. That introduced him to the American household, you know?
exactly.
Whereas for others it'd be like, "Oh, you know that guy who's in a lot of the Christopher Nolan films. Yeah, I like him. You know, he played Scarecrow and he's in some other stuff. Who's that? He's the guy in Inception." And I was like, "Yeah, Cillian Murphy."
Yeah.
Yeah, he's had such an interesting trajectory as a career, and this is such a mature role for him. This is the oldest he's felt, even though he's not as old as Oppenheimer is. He has to portray 20s Oppenheimer, 30s, 40s, 50s, and even a scene or two with Oppenheimer in the 1960s, which is like a Citizen Kane level of age ranges that you need to wrap together. He's committing to giving us this character at every point of his life that Christopher Nolan has seen to highlight, and it's remarkable to see him transform. And it is like, that's the comparison I make, is Citizen Kane, is that like sort of, you're seeing the young boisterous man who's kind of like on top of the world, and then you see the turn, and obviously that amazing turn of the moment, we know it, but yeah, it's amazing.
Well, I mean, obviously, I know we all know the moment you're talking about, but the thing with Cillian Murphy in that movie is there's close-ups of just his eyes in IMAX, where his eyes are bigger than a human being,
Yes.
and you're just focusing on them, and they're so full of emotion. It can portray 1,000 things in his eyes in just a singular moment. Because I forget who said it. This is not a Connor original by any means. I forget which journalist or reviewer said it, which critic. But they said there's nothing more confusing and devastating than being celebrated for the worst day of your life.
Yeah. That's a yeah.
And that just he portrays that conflict so deeply.
Yes. Yeah.
And just looking at his face,
But yeah, Adam Driver for Ferrari. How many times has he been nominated now?
This is his second nomination.
His second after Marriage Story.
He's one win.
He won that year.
Yes, the
Good for
first 2
him.
years we tied. He and Pattinson are both tied that year.
Nice.
Yeah, Michael Mann movies are about a lot of things, but if you look at Heat and this, and Thief, and a lot of the other, to a lesser extent, Manhunter, they're all kind of about masculinity and how that is toxic in a prison, and these men who just can't get out of their own way. Adam Driver fits so perfectly into the Michael Mann character.
Yes. Coleman Domingo for Rustin. Wow. One of my favorite performances of the year coming from Coleman. Another late addition. I got to see it right before I cut off, and thank goodness I got around to it. Thank goodness we got around to it. And I love that this film really focuses on Rustin's contribution, him setting up this this like protest, this event at Washington D.C., this famous event that is defining of 20th century America, that he coordinated that. He got the room, he got the phones, he got the people, he helped print the flyers. Seeing that the whole character, because it is like, you can consider it a biopic, right? It's about him, but it's about his work. We don't just walk around with Rustin aimlessly seeing scenes that he does in this demure kind of a way. There's so much drive to this film and showing how his life impacts his work and his mission, his goal, and vice versa, you know? And that's what's so fascinating is how Coleman Domingo is able to balance a character's personal life, personal wants and desires and needs with their goals and the people they interact with, and all of this under this like heavy historical context, you know? It just feels like when you're talking about an event like this, you have the weight. And I think Coleman Domingo carries it perfectly. So, yeah.
For a vast majority of my life, I did not know his name. I was not familiar with his story whatsoever.
Yeah.
If you were taught history in an American classroom, I bet a lot of money that in your textbook, his name is not mentioned. Obviously, like I mentioned to you when you were talking about the nominations in the first place, a man of incredible bravery and perseverance. And like I said to you, I can't imagine the struggle of being an out gay black man in 1960s America. And to carry all that weight on you and to work tirelessly for not just yourself, but an entire community that is being persecuted against, and not resting and, not compromising.
And at the same time, be like the most confident quip machine you've ever heard, just consistently. Like he doesn't let it get to him, not publicly, not in the face of public adversity. He does not let it get to him. He always has that defense up.
Does not let his struggles get in the way of his mission.
Yeah.
And obviously he is someone who, was heavily multifaceted, as we're shown by Coleman Domingo's incredible performance.
Yeah. So yeah, let us move on to Best Actress. The nominees for Best Actress all: Margot Robbie for Barbie, Emma Stone for Poor Things, Lily Gladstone for Killers of the Flower Moon, Carey Mulligan for Maestro, Ayo Edebiri for Bottoms. Speaking of Ayo, a remarkably talented actress who gave a great comedic performance, had a great year in movies in general, but particularly with Bottoms.
Emma Seligman, a director I really much enjoy. Her first two movies that she has out now, Shiva Baby and now obviously Bottoms. Written by her and Rachel Sennett, Andy Award nominee Rachel Sennett.
Mm-hmm.
I was the one who fought heavily for you to watch this movie, so I'm very glad that you came out of it showing support for this nomination. I'm very glad because I've loved Ayo for a long time, but no, she's somebody who like we've mentioned a lot of times recently, just somebody who's been showing up a lot recently and is always knocking out of the park. Even like a little tiny guest spot like she did in Black Mirror last season. Like, yeah, she's always killing it.
Carey Mulligan for Maestro. Another actress who brings the halt.
Yes.
In Bradley Cooper's very insular kind of world of Bernstein, I think she brings something that I don't know, I think she bridges the human gap between us and this super fan who's making the biopic of one of his childhood heroes. Yes.
It is very fair to say that Felicia, and by extension Carey Mulligan, and even Bradley Cooper has acknowledged us multiple times in interviews, is the heart of that movie.
Yes.
And yeah, she's utterly incredible in that film.
And their chemistry is great. I love their chemistry together, Lily Gladstone, Killers of the Flower Moon. Yeah, I mean, it's not new to say that that's clearly a standout performance in general from that film. I think it's a pretty myopic view, but it's an understandable view for people to get misunderstood. Well, people get misunderstood in Scorsese films all the time. But to kind of look at it as like, well, yeah, then she just gets sick and she doesn't do anything for the rest of the movie. I'm like, well, actually, there's quite a bit to what she is doing. because it is a
Yes.
progression. It is a like a degradation of her character, scene by scene by scene. But there are times when she's kind of slipping in and out
Yeah.
of. It feels like she's this connection to the new Osage and the traditional Osage, trying to bargain with the idea of sharing this land with the white man, and the FBI and everyone who's coming in and just coexisting. And then there is the traditional side of her family and her ancestors. And her being this bridge is what's so the most fascinating to me about her character,
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of, I mean, it does feel wrong when you're talking about such a singular female performance to compare her to male actors. But like we talked about with Cillian Murphy, there's so much in her eyes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And even Scorsese said when he cast her, he like just like on a Zoom call, he understood like this deep presence that she had. Well,
Yeah.
but like we talked about last year with Austin Butler,
Oh
it
yeah.
is a physical performance.
It is. So
Does she have a
much
lot
of
of
it.
big moments? No, but there's something so intrinsic to how she is physically embodying this deep sickness and literally being poisoned for months on end.
Yeah. Emma Stone for Poor Things. But like the Neo Frankenstein narrative feels fresh and anew with Emma Stone, and I think she's digging deeper as an actress than I've seen her dig before, and that's why she is here, because I've always kind of liked her quite a bit.
Yeah. A lot of people have described her performance in this movie as fearless, and I think that's probably the best adjective to go for.
Agreed. Fearless. And then Margot Robbie for Barbie. Probably one of the most iconic performances of the year. And I think she really hit her stride in 2019 with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Bombshell and a lot of great performances. And then we got Babylon last year, and we got Barbie this year.
Also, being a very involved creative force in the movie
Yeah.
as well, and understanding what that movie is and being a champion for it, and being so deep in this material that she does deliver an incredibly, is it an eccentric performance? Is it a surreal performance? Yeah, but it's still so, like Ryan's is so grounded in that world and that deep emotionality and just like feeling lost.
It's a film of self-discovery.
It is. It's a film of self-discovery.
But yeah, you want to list off Best Director?
The nominees for Best Director are Emerald Fennell, Saltburn, Christopher Nolan, Oppenheimer, Hayao Miyazaki, The Boy and the Heron, Michael Mann, Ferrari, and Sean Durkin, The Iron Claw.
Quite a five. Quite a five. We have some returning names. Well, one returning name, Emerald Fennell, who you might remember from Promising Young Woman, has really taken the social zeitgeist by storm with Saltburn. Quite the film. And I said this to Angie. I will say it to you, Connor. This is a film that, I mean, if there is one thing that is the strongest aspect of this film, it is its direction. It is the choices that Emerald Fennell makes to tell this story in the way no one else could tell it except her. And it's remarkable to see the massive improvement, I feel like, from Promising Young Woman. Not to say that was like she dropped the ball on that one, but like, I just really feel like she excelled with the direction in this one, and I love it.
Yeah, at very least, like, the direction in Promising Young Woman is much more reserved than Saltburn is. And I think
Yes.
Saltburn it shows a confidence, really, that comes with, making a very well-renowned feature that won you an Academy Award not too long ago.
Yes.
And just coming out, like we said with Emma Stone, the direction in Saltburn, the material you've written to direct is fearless. And it does go out there, and it's big, and it's loud, and it's camp, and, there's just an energy
I like
to
that
it.
she shot her shot,
She did. She
and
made a
you
movie
know
that
what?
only she could have made at that time, yeah.
Turns out it was nothing but net, so.
Yes, people like the movie,
Yeah.
myself included.
Hayao Miyazaki, Boy and the Heron, watching a master who we thought was finished come back and continue his creative journey, getting to a more surreal and dreamlike place that I was not expecting, and advancing the form of animation. Glad to have him on here. Nolan for Oppenheimer, Michael Mann, Ferrari. A lot of people said the return of Michael Mann. I am hard pressed to argue that. I really feel like this
Well,
is,
not just in terms of return of like to quality,
yeah,
but the guy's been gone for like 8 years.
yes. He
So the
finally
return
got
of
this
Michael
thing
Mann.
together. It really does feel like the return of Michael
Yeah,
Mann.
he's been trying
And
to make this movie in some iteration for 20 years, like
yeah,
something
literally.
crazy like that.
Just how close to death everything is. His company and the racers and Enzo and the peace and tranquility of his complicated life, and how it unravels or doesn't unravel. I think Michael Mann tells quite a story here, and I want to rewatch it. But
What do they call it? Their it's not their beautiful shame, but what he calls racing. It's like there's something something.
yes, yeah, it is kind of like
And
that.
like, you know, what it is to be a father, what it is to be a son. Like it's
Yeah.
it's
and a husband.
and a husband.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
And then Sean Durkin, Iron Claw. Wow, what a film.
yeah. Speaking of what it's like to be a father, what it's like to be a son,
Oh,
what it's like to be a brother.
easily the most devastating film of the cinema year
Yeah.
for me, The Iron Claw. And it goes through so many stages. You know, I feel like I'm watching many different types of films throughout the film. It starts off and I'm thinking it's one thing, then I think it's another, then I think it's another, and it's because it's all of these things. It's a kaleidoscopic look at these people, and it's pulling from so much, not just with story or production, but genre. This is a funny movie sometimes. There are
Yes.
jokes
Yeah.
in this film, and there are really heartfelt family moments, and there are some you have these high highs and these depressive lows. The most depressive lows. Like, how much more can this family go through?
Yeah. But even in moments of extreme sadness, they're in buried deep and drenched in tragedy.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned earlier in this recording, which there's moments even in the midst of tragedy, which just are so beautiful
Yeah.
and subtle in their depiction.
It's just
Or
it's affecting. It's just deeply affecting. It's yeah. Bravo to Sean. Bravo to everyone on this list. Our final category of the day of all nominations list, we have made it to Best Picture. And we'll go, I guess, one by one on these, Connor. The nominees for Best Picture all.
Blackberry,
Bottoms.
Ferrari,
Guardians Volume 3.
The Holdovers,
The Iron Claw.
Oppenheimer,
Past Lives.
and Rustin.
And there they all. Yeah. You might be interested or confused, perhaps, to see Blackberry on this list. It's bizarre because this is Blackberry's only nomination for the whole evening. It's a bizarre thing for us because plenty of other performances and aspects of the film made all shortlists, but we both felt like Blackberry was a very solidly made film. It was one of the first films I fell in love with this year, back in like April or May, whenever I saw it. And we wanted it to be represented. It is one of our best pictures of the year. It might be weird that like, oh yeah, no nominations, but it is a very good film. We'll talk about it more probably in the Andes itself, but yeah, the rise and fall of the BlackBerry Empire in the 2000s and what the birth of the smartphone and what that was to society is a very intriguing story, and they tell it well. So
Yeah. And I mean, the story of someone with true heart and good intentions being corrupted by just the realities of being successful is a tried and true story done 1,000 times before.
yeah.
I'll leave Blackberry at a beautiful metaphor the movie does. Early on in the film, you know exactly what I'm going to say, probably. Early on in the film, there is an intercom that has a slight white noise hiss.
Yes.
And it drives Jay Baruchel's character nuts. And he has to fix it. He tells Glenn Howerton's character, you know, we're not going to rush this. We're not going to be a part of that hiss. We're not going to not put every amount of care and love into this.
Yeah.
Because the worst thing, the enemy of perfect is good, but the enemy of humankind is good enough.
Yeah.
You
What
know?
a good line.
And they never just want to be
yes.
good enough. And the end of the movie, at the end of the day, the final shot of this man who has lost everything is looking at this product that meant so much to him and hearing that same white noise. I almost cried hearing white noise. So
yeah, which is like,
you,
that movie can do that. Bravo.
Yes,
But yeah, that's the Andes. That's the nominations list. Thank you all so much for listening. We will see you at the Andes in just a couple short weeks. We're excited for it. You should be excited too, as always. Anything to promote? Anything new to...
Well, Dan, funny you mentioned that.
Oh, yeah.
I finally did something I've been talking about doing for years.
Mm-hmm.
I made a comprehensive every film that has been nominated for the Andes Letterboxd list.
There it is. The definitive list.
Yeah, which you can find at, you guessed it, guys, Cranberry 18. C-R-A-N-D Berry 18.
My favorite Letterboxd page. Finally, it has an Andes list. I've been waiting and waiting.
Yeah, not to be confused with Angie's List, the website.
It's the Andes list.
Andes list.
Yes. And as always, if you're interested in any of the other Letterboxd lists that have come along with this show, we have the Film and Cranberry 18 list, and also some other ones on my account, DA_N. Yeah, it'll be tough to whittle these down to one winner each, but we're gonna do it, and we will present it to you as always. So yeah, thank you for listening, and we will see you soon.
See you soon.